Well, welcome to this edition of Human Wisdom Live. Today, we're going to talk about a subject that is at the heart of being human and can make or break our happiness, which is our relationships. And all of us in our lifetime will experience difficult relationships, and they can have an impact on our happiness, whether it's at work or at home. And if we can find a way of managing these relationships, then it can have a huge impact on our life. And this is one area where wisdom plays a huge role, or a deeper understanding of how our minds function and what's going on in our own thinking. And this can help us to understand others. So my guest for this discussion today is Dominic Curran, who's a retired head teacher and a life and human wisdom coach. So welcome, Dominic.
Thanks, Manoj. Pleasure to be here.
So, Dominic, how big is the problem? Why do you think we should bother exploring the subject?
My initial thoughts on that actually is probably a quick show of hands, and I don't necessarily ask everybody to do this, but how many of us in this room, in this virtual room, have experienced dysfunctional relationships? So I'll admit I'm going through a divorce, after many years of marriage. So I'll hold my hand up to that. Have I experienced dysfunctional relationships at work? As a head teacher of 12 years, as a teacher for 25 years, did I see dysfunctional relationships amongst young children? Yes, I did. Did I see dysfunctional relationships amongst staff at work? Yes, I did. Have I had conversations with people around dysfunctional relationships? As a leader, yes. As a dad, yes. So I would imagine we're all of one mind here, that we all have. So in terms of how common it is, I think we can basically say it's something we'll all experience.
Well, it's reflected in society because divorce rates are 50%. And once you start cohabiting in the first year of your relationship, the chances of you breaking up are 70%. 20% of marriages in the US, they say, are abusive. And of course, that we have very few numbers for dysfunctional families and how many brothers and sisters don't talk to each other, or parents and children who don't talk to each other, and we could go on and on. So it is definitely a huge problem in all our lives. And of course, they have a huge impact on us, don't they, Dominic?
They do, yes. Again, I'll speak, I'll be open and honest here. In terms of that personal relationship, that significant other, we both suffered greatly. There's I suppose there's elements of depression that came in, certainly low mood, almost like a roller coaster of emotions at times, So, and to say that that doesn't affect me when I go to work is, for me was kind of, I suppose, a ridiculous thing to say. Of course, if I'm not having a fulfilling personal relationship, or if I've got any difficulties in terms of those personal relationships, then yes, it's going to affect me at work as well. I think, one of the things that obviously in terms of divorce particularly is just in terms of financial hardship, the difficulties, the conflict that this can bring, trying to sort out even financial implications of things like divorce and what have you, as well as many other things, Manoj.
Well, it leads to emotional pain, let's call it that, which can cause bitterness, leads to anger, violence. I mean, when we say 20% of relationships are abusive, it means there's physical abuse, not just the mental abuse. And you can feel the world is against you. It leads to low self-esteem, you think you're not lovable because you're not worthy of being loved, and so on. So the heartache that goes on. And just recently there was a case in the papers where a judge almost ticked off to a couple who'd wasted all their fortune over 10 years of legal wrangling in the divorce. So they had got literally nothing left for themselves. All of it had gone to the lawyers in the last 10 years. And of course, we've had a very prominent tennis player recently who has had problems with his relationships. So we all suffer. Okay, we know this much, but let's go deeper. What is it that makes relationships become difficult? What's going on in our thinking? Can we say something that's universally true for all human beings? What's at the core of it?
I'd like to, if you don't mind, Manoj, I'd like to introduce a card trick here, because I think this might be appropriate.
Yes.
If you don't mind, just this is the way. This isn't really magic, actually, but let's see if people understand this. I think Suzanne might know where I'm coming from here. So if I just hold up, and I've got to get this in the right place because it's online. So if I'm holding that up and I ask you what color is the card that I'm holding up, and I'm assuming, as I look at my screen, that you're all going to say it's yellow.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So I'm going to say it's blue. And no matter what you say to me, Manoj,
I'm going to insist it's yellow.
Yeah, it is. I'm sorry, but it's blue. I'm looking at a blue card.
Yes.
Now, what you're probably all thinking, there isn't magic here. You probably realize, of course, it's really simple, isn't it? I've got a blue side and there's a yellow side. Yeah. But the interesting thing for me is that we don't think like that, as simple as that I've got another perspective from you. What we get attached to our perspective. I'm looking at a blue card, and I can't see that you're looking at a yellow card. So no matter what you say to me, you can argue, you can shout, and you can say, of course it's yellow. I'm going to stand here and say, no, it's not, it's blue. It's clearly blue. I can see it's blue. Yes. Why are you saying it's yellow when it's blue?
And then it goes further, because then I try to convince you that it's yellow, and you try to convince me that it's blue. And we just can't see each other's point of view, can we? No.
And I mean, to be honest, Manoj, well, thankfully we got on well, so we won't fight about this, but that's where conflict comes from, because we're so attached to our perspective and assume that everybody's looking at the same thing.
Yes. And this perhaps is a very good way of illustrating the power of conditioning. Right? If you think about the number one reason why, or one of the very big reasons why there is this conflict, is because we are unconsciously conditioned by our past influences. We're not aware we're conditioned, and yet we become attached to that conditioning. So I see the world through my lens, you see it through yours. But I'm convinced that this is the only way to see the world, right? Mm-hmm. So then I try to convince you that I'm right, you try to convince me you're right. And that's where the conflict begins.
I think for me, just the simple understanding of knowing that I am looking at a different perspective, even if I know that you don't know there's another perspective, you're completely convinced. The action that I can take personally is to understand that you are looking at something different. And for me, I need to try to understand that.
Yes. So to be curious about it.
Yeah.
See, we are never curious about other people's point of view. We're more interested in convincing others of our own. Why do you think
I think, sorry, Manoj, I think it's one of the key things about that conditioning aspect, though, is it is unconscious in many ways, isn't it? We don't realize that we are stuck in our particular perspective. And of course, we're going to think it's right. No. Actually, can I just give you a really simple example of that? Many years ago, we had some doors to the bedroom that were open to the outside world. It was a summer night, and early morning, I'm talking about very early morning, the bird song that was outside of these doors from the bedroom was absolutely incredible. And I remember lying, whatever time it was in the morning, and just listening. This bird song was waking me up. And I was thinking, oh, that is absolutely beautiful. And my wife got up and slammed the door shut and said, bloody birds. And now I'm not saying, well, what I thought at the time was, how come you don't appreciate that bird song? Why are you not seeing what I'm seeing? Yeah. Like I was right. And at the time, I'll hold my hand up. I was thinking, but you're not appreciating the world outside. Well, actually, what if she was just appreciating sleep and didn't want to be woken up? Yeah. What makes me right? What gives me the right to think that I sit? Well, of course, that's part of my conditioning, isn't it?
Yes. But this simple realization is something that we don't come to. But just let's explore that a bit deeper. So there's my conditioning. My mind is automatically comparing what it's seeing in the world with what it knows, right? So in your case, your wife is seeing these birds singing, right? Or it's seeing you wanting to listen to these birds. And that creates a disturbance in our thinking. Anything I meet that's different creates a disturbance. So the only way to get rid of that disturbance is either to be critical of you and try and change you so that you become like me, right? And in trying to change you to be more like me, and you trying to change me to be like you, this is an automatic process. It's not something we're aware of. That, again, is the root of conflict. But let's move on. The other huge area is our emotional needs, which we look to others to meet. Can you think of a few? And how that can cause conflict?
Actually, interesting. What comes to mind is a work situation where I was, again, as head, as leader of the school, I wanted people to buy into my vision and the mission of where we needed to take the school. And as far as I was concerned, again, I was right with that. And I remember having conversations with several members of staff about, trying to convince them of that. And one of them in particular, I remember said all the right things in that meeting, and then went off and did her own thing, if you like. And I got upset by that. I got upset because I wanted her to buy into my point of view. I wanted her to understand that I was the boss, and therefore she should do what I expect.
Yes.
And that actually did cause me emotional pain, because it caused me to question who I was as leader, as a person, and saying, well, am I wrong? Am I right? And
it's simpler than that, Dominic. It's just our ego reaction. We want other people to do what we want. So we have a hidden need for power in any relationship. By the way, it could be with children or with parents or with siblings or at work or home. You want people to do what you want. And if they don't do what you want, you react with, you can react with anger. But our emotional needs are deeper than that. We have a need to be listened to be understood, to be loved, right? For pleasure and all of that. And if my needs are not being met in that relationship, then I start feeling angry and stressed. And it could be a simple thing like, I don't think you're listening to me. By the way, I have a need to be listened to, but I don't have the same need to listen. That's just the way the mind is wired. Right? So if I feel you're not listening to me, even if it's tiny, eventually over time, that leads to resentment, bitterness, and so on. So I'm expecting you to meet my needs. You're expecting me to meet your needs. And if those needs are not met, then that can result in conflict.
I'm just going to give a really simple example actually of that happened recently, where my expectations were that I would have somebody say a simple hello or good morning to me. But what happened was she picked up the phone and she checked something on her phone. Now, my expectation was, no, you say good morning first. And what I can tell you that happened in my mind, I went through a whole host of things around, who does that mean? What's happening now? What's happening in this relationship? Does it mean that, we're heading apart, that we're not, not connected in some way? Now, where does that come from? That possibly comes from, and I think it does, comes from previous experiences, previous conditioning, my expectations of that particular person that says, you should do it like this. And rather than having a rather than just saying, can you just put the phone down, please, and let's have a chat? I didn't.
Yes.
I went into that thought process of, this means this. Now, of course, that's my perspective. So what I've just done there is transposed my thinking, saying, therefore, if she doesn't do that, then she must think this.
Yes. But it goes one step further, which is every time you have an expectation that's not met, you get a bit hurt, right? Depending on how big the expectation is. And then our mind remembers that hurt. We don't forget. So the next time you meet that person, you see them through the lens of that screen of that hurt. So you're more reactive.
But I would also say, in this case, I'm seeing this person through the lens of actually a previous relationship, because that hurt was from something else.
Yes.
And that's unfair to then transpose that lens onto, another person, thinking, if you've behaved like that, I've had that happen to me before from somebody else. Therefore, you must be the same as that other person and must think the same as that other person.
So just waking up to that fact that we are seeing people through the screen of our previous memories of them and of other experiences allows us to pause and see them freshly as they are. Right? And that can make such a big difference. And the other thing that matters, I think, is if we're stressed for other reasons. It could be the boss has been mean to me at work. I come home, I'm just frustrated. And children tell me this in the playground, that when they get angry with somebody, it's a kind of release and they feel better. So 80% of us are stressed to some extent. And it may not be caused by the relationship, might be caused by other things, our disappointments in life and all of that. But our relationships are where we take all that out. And by getting rid of my frustration onto you, I feel better. But of course, that doesn't do very much for our relationship, right? And then you wonder, why am I reacting in this way over something tiny? And then, of course, you react, and our mind is reactive. That's the way the human mind is, right?
What comes to mind there is a conversation I had just yesterday, actually, with a leader of a school who talked about, being in a very stressful situation with lots and lots of things to deal with. But then, a member of staff coming through the door, being frustrated, as you say, and needing to offload their stresses. And rightly so, But then this school leader, who's also under stress, understanding that they didn't want to meet that stress with their stress. But actually, because both parties were stressed, it actually led to, I wouldn't say necessarily conflict, but probably not the best solution.
No.
So exactly. Stress meeting stress.
Yes. You can't think clearly, if your mind is stressed. No. And one last thing, of course we could go on, but one last thing to point out in terms of how the mind functions and why that naturally causes conflict unconsciously, is my mind assumes that the way I am feeling is caused by you. Right?
Yeah.
It just assumes that automatically. If I'm feeling stressed, it's because of you. If I'm angry, you're the reason I'm angry. If I'm, feeling sad, you're making me sad. Not realizing that my reaction to you is what's making me feel the way I am.
Yeah.
That realization on its own is, like a shaft of light in a dark room, because after all, nobody can make me feel anything if I don't want to. But because my mind is automatically and unconsciously reactive, that's what happens. Okay, now let's move on to perhaps the most important question of this session, which is, how can we respond with wisdom? Now that we've understood how the mind functions and why it causes difficulties in our relationships, what are the ways we can respond with wisdom?
I think there's, well, actually, if I bring the card perspective up, just for me, there is great wisdom in actually two things, I suppose. The pause, first of all, the power of pause. I always think is incredibly powerful, actually, rather than reacting automatically. But the power in the pause, in that even few moments, is to understand that if I'm in conversation with you, Manoj, and you are telling me about how yellow your card is, and I'm sitting here thinking, no, it's blue, it's blue, it's blue. The pause allows me just to say, hang on a second. If Manoj is telling me there's yellow, maybe I should try to be, again, curious, as we say, and question. Let me understand, what is it that you do see?
Yes. Because
hopefully what we can both understand at some point is that there are two colors here. And actually, this is just, you're looking at yellow, I'm looking at blue. But actually, if there's three of us in the room, there might be a red card. There might actually, however many people are in this room, we're all seeing things from our own perspective.
Yes.
And for me, that's one of the most powerful things that, in order to respond with wisdom, we just simply need to understand that.
Yes, to be curious about other people's point of view and realize that our point of view is just one perspective of many. That's I think, a huge step forward. I think the other thing to realize, the thing that heals all relationships is affection. Okay. That means, suppose someone is stressed, angry with you, etc. You can realize it's up to you how you react. You can still have a mind that is as still as a lake. It doesn't have to be automatically reactive. And what the other person really needs is affection. Invariably, our conflicts are a cry for love and affection, aren't they?
And you know what? I think, again, what comes to mind when you say that is that the affection is affection for self, knowing that, do you know what? I'm just being human. It's okay that I see my side, and it's okay. I understand that I'm going to react like that, and to know that another person has a different perspective, and if they are stressed, to see that where they're coming from is in their thinking, allows me to have affection, love for that person.
Yes.
And understand that they're just being human.
And sometimes people just want you to accept their point of view. If you just said, yeah, I can see, like your blue and yellow card, I can see why you see it's yellow, different to me. I understand. I accept. Sometimes acceptance dissolves so much conflict.
I would say I would agree with that. And one of the biggest things, and again, I'm speaking personally here, that the accept, in terms of the marriage, the acceptance that she was allowed her perspective, and it shouldn't be up to me to say, no, you have to think like me. To accept that she was perfectly entitled to live her life the way she did, to have her own perspective, actually removed a lot of pressure from me. But I know that it's definitely led to less conflict, because there are many things where I'm sure that we both would say, oh, well, I'm saying this, you're saying that, and it could easily lead to conflict.
Yes.
But I've accepted that. And it's without a doubt, Manoj, without a doubt, it takes pressure away.
Yes. And remember how I said that our mind automatically assumes that you're the cause of my pain, right? And just realizing that the difficulty might lie in me, not in the other person. The relationship is difficult because of me.
Mm-hmm.
That itself is another shaft of light in a dark room that can really illuminate our lives. And the only person that I can change here is me. And if I change, the relationship is going to change.
Yeah.
If I can listen without interrupting, if I can accept people as they are, if I can stop trying to change them, if I can accept different perspectives, so many things I can do, which I have control over, but I need wisdom for that. I need to see clearly, understand what's going on. I think the other thing is criticism. That plays a huge role. And how can we respond with wisdom and be less critical, perhaps?
Again, if I'll go back to the Birds song, just keep it simple. I definitely would be guilty of criticizing her for not seeing the beauty in the thing that I saw. And so obviously that criticism led to probably my internal angst about the relationship. And I know that it led to conflict in terms of she thinking that she wasn't good enough in some way because she didn't see it the way I saw. So of course, that's going to lead to further upset and emotional pain.
Yes.
But if I if I'd understood, just in terms of that, you know, because criticism's it's a funny word, because there are times when you have to give difficult messages, aren't there? And it's about whether you can do that in a compassionate and affectionate way, but understand that people have their own right to a point of view. But what you want them to do is see a little bit of your side.
Yes.
Well, actually, the way to get somebody to see your side is to see their side.
Yes.
So it's not a case of criticizing, it's a case of understanding, I think.
But the way our mind is wired automatically is whenever we encounter something that's different, we're critical. Think of how we bring children up. And the same thing applies to adults. So if you're a person who's naturally and automatically critical of others all the time, and without realizing it, that is going to really affect your relationship. Just waking up to that and pausing and asking a simple question: how is it going to be received? Do I need to say anything at all now? Or maybe just keep quiet? Simple things could make a difference. But lastly, I mean, I know we could go on, but lastly, if there is conflict and genuine difficulty, and we see things differently, what tips could we give or offer to have that difficult conversation with somebody? I think it's the question that's just come up. How can we sit somebody down and say, look, I need to talk to you because I'm really struggling here with our relationship? Because if you don't address things, that's also a problem, right? Then things just keep going from bad to worse.
Yeah, and I think the most powerful thing, the most powerful technique, tip for me, Manoj, was I listen. I don't go in with the, right, I've got this to say. I need to tell this person too. I go in with, right, I need to understand this person, because if they are having difficulty in some way, you know, they're not meeting my expectations, let's say, in terms of their work, then actually my first duty is to understand why. And I can only do that through listening, to find out what their difficulties are.
Be curious, yes. And perhaps also not to blame people for how you are feeling, to realize that how you feel is a reaction from your thinking to what's happening outside. Of course, this doesn't apply to where you're being physically abused or something like that. I'm talking of most other circumstances. But for me personally, the thing that really leads to compassion is realizing that deep down, two things. One is the other person is the same as me. They are just reacting from their conditioning, their fear, their self-interest, all that. I am the same human being deep down. They have no awareness of all these things going on in the background, in their own thinking. And I am the same. So realizing that deep down, you and I, and all of us on this call and on this planet are the same human being, because our heart works in the same way, so does our mind. The right hand and the left hand look different, but they're connected to the same body. And that understanding awakens compassion and can bring healing. Compassion, affection, understanding, acceptance can heal the most difficult relationships. Right?
And that must start within.
Yes. I'm going to take a moment, just 2 minutes, to introduce people to the Human Wisdom app and show you the different areas in the app that are relevant to this subject of difficult relationships. And then I'm going to open it up for everyone's questions and comments. And I hope you have a question or a comment. So keep that in mind over the next couple of minutes while I show you around what's happening here in this app. So give me a second. So the Human Wisdom app is at humanwisdom.me, and you can see it on your computer. You can also see it on your phones. It's on the Google Play Store, but it's coming on the Apple stores imminently. I'm going to show you the existing dash, what we have, and then I'm going to show you the new version that's coming in a couple of weeks' time. So at the top, you'll find lots of stories about difficult relationships and how people use their wisdom to overcome them. These are true stories. There's an online journal, a forum, podcasts. There's quite a few podcasts connected to relationships, some short videos on how we can be kind, for example, to each other. And there's a blog at the end. This is the introduction to wisdom, which is based really on looking and learning about yourself. There's nothing to be anxious about at all. It's just about, because realize deep down, we're the same human being. If you have a conflict in your relationships, there's a video here called Conflict, and it's just 10-minute video, which gives you lots of tips on what you can do right now so that you don't make things worse and you can get things better. And if you scroll down the app, of course, all the things we've talked about here, conditioning, the mind comparing, it's reactive, we operate from self-interest, our emotional needs, all of these play a role in our relationships. And having an in-depth understanding of that allows us to have happier relationships. Here, there's a module on anger. Somebody the other day completed that module, one of our coaches, and said for the first time, he understood that his anger was a reaction from his thinking to what was happening outside. All his life, he'd assumed other people were making him angry. And then we have a huge module on relationships. Why are relationships important, different types, emotional needs, the causes of conflict, feeling hurt, how can you have successful relationships, and so on. So there's the whole module on relationships to explore, along with love. What is love? And sometimes we struggle to know how to love others really in the way they want to be loved. Because the way the mind is wired is, for us, love is, if you do something for me, I'll do something for you. How to meet criticism with intelligence and not to be overly critical of others. So this goes on. Communication plays a huge role in all our relationships and is a big cause of dysfunction. So we can improve the way we communicate, and that can help us all. Of course, there are other things to explore, but that is it in a nutshell. And I'll just show you the new dashboard that we've got coming. We're really excited about this. So there's a daily practice coming, which is going to give you 5 things to do every day. So there's going to be a breathing exercise, a question of the day, a quotation. This one's about kindness, an audio meditation, and an activity of the day that you can do. Then we've collected all the information on particular subjects in one place. So you'll find, for example, there's a module where you can find everything on relationships all in one place. And then the rest of the app is just being organized differently. So I'll look forward to sharing that with you shortly. Okay, yes. One of the things we didn't explore, Dominic, is that all conflict is an opportunity for learning.
Yeah.
About ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So we look at conflict and difficult relationships as, oh, I wish it would go away. But there's so much to learn from them all, you know. But anyway, okay. Well, thank you. And
okay.
have a good day. Thank you.